and another. And one more. Thank you. Always thank you for indulging me in that. Breathing is good. Beats the alternative. So I've shared with you several times throughout the years that my job, my wonderful job, is to deliver fresh, inspirational, new talks every week. 52 weeks a year. For 19 years. Last week. So as a result, what I've done is to train myself to always be listening, always be paying attention and watching for ideas that I think might make a relevant and topical and hopefully inspirational talk. And if there's a real life story that goes along with it, all the better. Today I have several real life stories that I'm going to share with you. So it's going to be a lot less lecture and a whole lot more storytelling. Is that okay with you today? All right, so last week I was talking to Luis about the birth of his daughter, Emily. And he was telling me about Emily's first week. She was born like 2 weeks ago, right? And what he told me and the insight that he had, this is a very wise man. This is a philosopher, this guy right here. I got to share, I hadn't planned to tell you this, but he told me that when we were at SAIT back in the day, that he'd sit behind and listen and translate parts of my talk into Spanish and send it to his sister in Venezuela. So this is a guy who's paying attention. He's paying attention. I got to turn my fan on. I got emotional already. So anyway, he's telling me, right, about Emily's first week. And you know, Luis is not the first person ever to have a baby and ever to declare his unconditional love for the baby. But it's just this observation that he made in the first week was so inspiring, I just had to share it with you. So I'm going to take her picture down right now because I know you guys, I know! But if I don't, you're not going to listen to me. Maybe we'll bring her back. Okay, everybody say goodbye. Goodbye, Emily. So this conversation took place last week after service. And I asked him, so how's it going? Having a newborn in the house. Either he or Rosa have a child before. And he said to me, Pat, it's the most amazing thing. He says, just looking at her, looking at things, I realized that she is seeing the world with brand new eyes. Everything is new to her. So she's learning every time she looks at something. She is learning something new. Well, I've known a lot of people have had newborns, but I never heard it put quite like that. That she is looking at life through brand new eyes. And I thought, not only is that a beautiful way of describing the experience of a newborn, but it's also a beautiful way of describing what we go through when we wake up spiritually. For instance, when I first came to this teaching, and I began learning about the universe, and I began learning about my place in it, it was as if I was seeing things completely fresh and new. For me, it was colors. Colors were that much more vivid, and sunsets and sunrises would take my breath away, and people and animals just became more beautiful. It was as if, like the born-again Christians talk about, it was literally like being born again. Not in the way that they're talking about where I've accepted Jesus as my personal Savior. That's not our teaching. But rather, when I came into this teaching and I began to learn, what happened was that I had transcended. I had risen above. I had entered into a new way of being, a new way of living, and a new way of seeing and interacting with the world. It's as if a film had been taken off the lens of my mind, and everything seemed new again. And from the way that Louise described Emily seeing the world and his experience of that, it tells us that she too is experiencing a form of transcendence and a new way of being. So I'm reminded of one of my favorite teaching stories. It's called The Parable of the Twins. And I often use it when I'm talking about immortality because it really, really brings home the idea of life ongoing. However, I realized it was also relevant to this topic, so I'm going to share it with you. Once upon a time, twin boys were conceived. Weeks passed, and the twins developed. As their awareness grew, they laughed with joy. Isn't it great that we were conceived? Isn't it great to be alive? Together, the twins explored their world, and when they found their mother's cord that gave them life, they sang for joy. How great our mother's love is that she shares her life with us. As weeks stretched into months, the twins noticed how much the other was changing and growing. What does it mean, one asked. It means our stay in this world is coming to an end, said the other. But I don't want to go, said the one. I want to stay here always. We have no choice, said the other. But maybe there is life after birth. How could there be, responded one. We will shed our life cord, and how can life be possible without it? Besides, we've seen evidence of others who were here before us, and none of them has returned to tell us that there is life after birth. No, this is the end. Maybe there is no mother after all. But there has to be, protested the other. How else could we get here? How else do we remain alive? Have you ever seen our mother? Said the one. Maybe she only lives in our minds. Maybe we made her up because the idea made us feel good. So the last days in the womb were filled with deep questioning and fear. Finally, the moment of birth arrived. And when the twins passed from their world, they opened their eyes and cried for joy, for what they saw exceeded their fondest dreams. So can't you imagine that's how Emily and other newborns react when they arrive in this world? Can't you just imagine they're like, wow, look at this place. So our founder, Ernest Holmes, had something to say about that. He says, there is a light and life at the center of all things, and a consciousness that responds. This imprisoned splendor to the eyes that perceive it burst like the glory of a new dawn. This imprisoned splendor to the eyes that perceive it, that's what we're talking about, burst forth like a new dawn. Now, I would be honest if I told you that my personal experience of awakening and rebirth was always like the glory of a new dawn. I cannot tell you that. There absolutely have been times in these many years when the world was not quite so shiny and it didn't look quite so new as it did in the early days of spiritual growth. But I want to explain kind of how that works. What happens for most of us, this is what happened for me, and I think it happens for a lot of us, is that we start to learn this stuff, and our trajectory of growth and our trajectory of awareness is kind of like this. It's just like, boom, right? Am I right? Those of you who know what I'm talking about. It's super steep. And then it would be natural. We couldn't keep that up all of the time. So what happens is that we take a class like a foundations class or the 100 series, and we see our relationship to the opening up, and our minds begin expanding like crazy. The heavens open up, and the angels sing, and everything is new and exciting and different, and oh my God. But then after a while, what happens is that the awareness starts to level off just a little bit. Because we can't grow at that rate all the time. We blip out of here. And it's not time for us to blip out of here, right? So then what happens is people say, well, I don't feel the same thrill that I used to. It's not as exciting as it was. Well, of course it's not. Because that initial awakening is like being born again. And then life levels out. So instead of a dramatic growth spurt, it just begins to level out a little bit. And the growth is a little more subtle. Is this making sense? But sometimes what we don't realize is that even though we're not experiencing those highs that we were in the beginning, we don't realize that because we did that, we are at a much higher level of consciousness than when we started. So instead of recognizing that we're on a whole new level, we think we've lost it, but nothing could be further from the truth, because where we are now is now the new norm. It's natural. It's usual. So we're here now. But as Oliver Wendell Holmes, not Ernest Holmes, Oliver Wendell Holmes said, man's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions. In other words, we can't go back. We will never be the same as we were. We have been changed at depth. We can't go back to seeing the world the way it was. Ernest Holmes put it this way: as we bring ourselves to a greater vision than the range of our present concept, we can then induce a greater concept and thereby demonstrate more in our experience. I'm going to say that one again because it's actually really good. As we bring ourselves to a greater vision than the range of our present concept, in other words, as we start seeing things bigger and better, then what can happen is that we can bring into our life a greater concept and demonstrate at the level of that consciousness. Yes? Make sense? So I'm going to give you another real-time example. This week was just full of them. What can I say? So, oh, no, don't look at that yet. So Oliver and his wife, have you met Oliver? Have you met my friend Oliver? So Oliver and his wife, Nika, are in the foundations class this time. So, and I know, it's very exciting. So in week 2, I was talking to them about the concept of getting parking spaces. This is something we do in early classes, is to teach people how to get front row parking spaces, because it's very simple and it's a surefire way of learning about the power of your mind. And what happens is, when it happens, you've used your mind to get parking spaces, and that builds faith, right? So I encourage the students, we have 30 people in the class, I mean, it's awesome, and I encourage them to start affirming that wherever they went, they would get front row parking. Because what happens is that when we affirm something consciously and it happens, that builds our faith a little bit. Wow, that was cool. Okay, let me try it again. Okay, that was cool. Let me try it again. And it's not a big deal, right? We're not attached to the outcome. And so we can play with it. There's not a lot of resistance in our mind, like if we're trying to affirm or demonstrate something really, really huge, just as a parking space, right? Well, during the following week, so from 2 Tuesdays ago to this last Tuesday, I received 5 Facebook messages and pictures from Oliver. He even used a bad word once in sending that to me. Now, prior to this, Oliver and Nika had absolutely no idea that they could affirm and demonstrate something quite so easily. But you had better believe that that no matter what happens from here on in, they will not be the same as they were before they tried this experiment. Their minds have been stretched by a new idea, and it will not, their mind, either one of them, will not return to when they were before, because they are now living in a whole new world. A whole new world. We're not going to have that song, sorry. So that was it. That was it. I can't, that was it. So I want to go back for a minute with my conversation with Louise. Because again, this was a profound conversation for me. He said something, brought me chills, brought me tears, it was emotional. He was talking about the idea that in observing Emily, looking at the world through her new eyes, he was also seeing the world through new eyes, through fresh eyes. In other words, he was able to see with a beginner's mind and learn things all over again right along with her. Those of you who are parents and grandparents, you know what I'm talking about, right? He talked about how everything looks different to him now because he's seeing things as he imagines that she is seeing them. Again, how many times have we had the experience of showing somebody something new and then seeing it through their eyes? Yeah. Takes on a whole new meaning, takes on a whole new significance. True story number 3, I experienced this recently with my nephew, who came up from Southern California for our grand opening. And it was such a thrill to show him our beautiful mountains and see them through his eyes in a brand new way for the very first time. In fact, I kind of laughed. So we're driving to Canmore, right? And he's practically hanging out the window, gooning on the mountains and taking pictures. And granted, the mountains around Canmore are cool. The Three Sisters, they're awesome. But I kept thinking, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till we go on the Icefields Parkway, right? So not only did I get to see the mountains through his beginner eyes, but he had the advantage of my mountain experience. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Because I had been there before, so I knew that there were cooler things coming, right? So I could act as his guide, and I could provide him with my perspective and my experience. Which brings me to the final part of my conversation with Louise. You had no idea I got this much from it, did you? Because what he had realized, that just as he was seeing the world through her eyes, she would also be seeing the world through his experienced eyes. In other words, as her father, and as one of her main teachers in life, he would be providing to her one of the lenses through which she would learn about life. So he talked about how important it was to provide her with the very best example that he was able to. And again, I thought about how that ties in with our commitment to to live an awakening life. Because we all know people who talk the talk, but don't walk the walk, don't we? We tell people how to live and how to be and everything, but they're not living that and being that way themselves. So the very, very best thing that we can do as we grow through this life is to live and teach by example, not just words. So that we can be the very best examples for all of the little ones and all of the unawakened ones. So I said that we weren't going to have the song, A Whole New World, We just couldn't get it together for that. I told her too late. So what I'm going to do is just share a few of the lyrics with you, because it's a beautiful song. And as I do, I'd like you to contemplate the kind of world that we want to leave for others. I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, splendid. Tell me, now when did you last let your heart decide? I can open your eyes, take you wonder by wonder, over, sideways, and under on a magic carpet ride. Unbelievable sights, indescribable feelings, soaring, tumbling, freewheeling through an endless diamond sky. A whole new world. Don't you dare close your eyes. 100,000 things to see. I'm like a shooting star. I've come so far. I can't go back to where I used to be. A whole new world with new horizons to pursue. I'll chase them anywhere there's time to spare. Let me share this whole new world with you. And while we're at it, let's us also live in that whole new world of possibility for ourselves as well. I love you, and so it is.